is the creator of life. The Bible says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Jeremiah 1:5. For you were created, my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works is wonderful. I know that full well. My friend was not hidden from you when I was made in a secret place, and I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me was written in your book, for one of them came to be. Psalm 139:13-16. For I know the plans I have for you, cares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, for not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in the future. Jeremiah 29:11.
If you'll take your Bibles and turn to Mark chapter 2. Mark chapter 2. And as you're turning there, I want to introduce to you Sanctity of Human Life Sunday. We as Southern Baptists recognize this day generally this time of the year. And I want to tell you the purpose for it. Americans have gone out of their way to protect all kinds of life. According to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service website, there are 469 endangered animals and 720 endangered plants in the United States. However, we have overlooked one special kind of life. Since 1973, more than 56 million abortions have been performed in the United States. That comes to more than 1 million abortions a year. The number of American babies killed by abortion each year is roughly equal to the number of U.S. military deaths that have occurred in all of the wars that the United States has ever been involved in combined. Today is Sanctity of Human Life Sunday. The purpose is simply to sound the alarm and call men and women in our community to healing through Jesus Christ. We are here to partner with Christ in His ministry of life. Now, the question is simply this: how can every person be a minister of life? And I want you to take your Bibles and look in Mark chapter 2. We're going to look in verse 23. Those couple verses, 23 through 28, are going to give us the context for the really my main text, which is verses 1 through 6. Now you say, I want to go ahead and address this. You're not going to see the sanctity of human life addressed specifically as far as directly or explicitly in this text. But what I want you to notice is the values of Jesus, okay? The morality of Jesus, the principles that Christ lived and taught. And I don't think it's a far stretch at all that this text is applicable for Sanctity of Human Life Sunday, okay? I'm going to simply walk you through the text and give you the points as they go along. Don't worry about throwing them on the board quite yet. I just want to read to you Mark chapter 23, Mark chapter 2, verses 23, and then to chapter 3, verse 4. Let's start in verse 23, all right? Everybody follow along with me. Everybody good? That is terrible. Everybody good? There we go. All right, Mark chapter 2, verse 23. Now it happened that he, and that's referring to Jesus, that's capitalized in my Bible, probably is in yours, went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. Now let's go ahead and stop right there. This is expository exegetical preaching. The Sabbath is a big deal in Jewish law and custom. There are two main reasons why the Jews are going to watch Jesus in detail on the Sabbath. First of all, what's one of the great 10 commandments? Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Keep it set apart. Believe it or not, if you go back and review Exodus chapter 20, guess which command has 4 verses dedicated to it? The Sabbath. It's the longest command in all of the 10 commandments. Now, for those who are Jewish historians, or you've taken some of our Old Testament series classes, for those who remember, when the Jewish people were disobedient to God and they were exiled to Babylon into a foreign nation under a foreign king who worshiped foreign gods to Jerusalem. They were there for 70 years. Does anybody remember how God derived the punishment of 70 years of them in exile? Anybody know? Here's my scholarship. See if anybody knows. It's fine if you don't. In 2 Chronicles, like at the very end, I think I have the reference wrote down right here. 2 Chronicles 36, verse 21. God commanded the people of Israel that for every 7th year, they were to let the land rest. Well, for 490 years, guess what they never did? Never let the land have its sabbatical. And so God, the Father, Yahweh, told them, for every time you missed it, you're going to spend 1 year out of the land so that it has its rest. So out of that punishment, out of the consequences of their sin, the Jewish leaders and the givers and scribes, they were tight when it came to the Sabbath. Does that make sense? We really messed this thing up in the past. We are not going to mess it up again. Everybody got what you need to understand that. This was a huge legal issue for the Jewish people, because you're going to have to see what Jesus is going to teach them here in a moment. So it happened that he went through grain fields on the Sabbath. Nothing wrong so far. But here's where it starts to get a little messy. Says this, and as they went, his disciples began to pluck the heads of grain. So Jesus and his posse, all right, to put it that way, they're walking through the grain fields. Now notice here, I think it's interesting, let's just point this out. It's not mentioned that Jesus is plucking anything. He's walking. But there behind him is you got his crazy bums. They're just plucking away at grain fields. Now, for those, he's not stealing. According to Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 25, according to Jewish law and custom, that if you were passing through a grain field, you had the right to pluck. Not to harvest, but you can pluck. You could pick a grape off of a vine and eat it, as a snack on the way. Everybody got what I'm talking about? So it says this. They begin to pluck the heads of grain in verse 24. And the Pharisees. This is a special sect of Jewish people who consider themselves Old Testament guardians of the law. They jump up to Jesus and said to him, look, why do they do what is not lawful on the Sabbath? Now, let me step aside for just a minute off of the sanctity of life issue and point out something. Have y'all ever noticed this? And this is why you have to understand your walk with God is so important. Is because what the disciples did the Pharisees go and address the disciples? They didn't go to the disciples and go, what are you guys doing? Who do they go address? Their master. And here's what you got to realize, that whether you like it or not, everything you say, do, and live, guess who it's a reflection of? Jesus. Is that not sad? We live our lives, and what I'm trying to say is, ultimately, hey, they may not care for you, but it does speak something of Christ. So just be mindful of it, all right? It goes on, it says this, he says, look, why do they do what is not lawful on the Sabbath? Lawful. They're saying we're looking at the legality of them plucking the grain out of the grain fields. And notice what Jesus said. Y'all, if y'all don't, I hope you can put on a sanctified imagination, because Jesus to me is one of the most sarcastic individuals probably in all of Scripture. Get what he's about to say. Get ready. He says this, he said to them, now these are the guardians of Old Testament law. Have you never read what David did? See that? Aren't you scholars? Did you not read this? Now, I love that. It shows the superiority. And can I tell you this, y'all? Jesus, the Son of God, was a man of this book. If Jesus thought it was that important to know this, okay, and defend this and use this not only against Satan but the Pharisees, it's important for our life. He says, have you never read? And understand this, I teach this to our students all the time. You can't do what you haven't read. Your Christian life may be this big. Why? Because probably your knowledge of the Bible is this big. All right? You want an expansive, awesome, exciting Christian life? Then you need to know more of this. They were limited in their freedom. They couldn't experience the blessings of God. Why? Because they never read. You not understand, Jesus says? Now notice what he goes on to tell them. I love this story. He says, have you never read what David did when he was in need and hungry? He and those with him. He went into the house of God in the days of Abiathar, the high priest, and ate the showbread, which is not lawful to eat, except for the priest, and also gave some to those who were with him. Now, let me tell you this story. You can find it in 1 Samuel chapter 21, verses 1 through 6, and here's what's so amazing about it. David's not even king yet. No, he has become victorious in battles. There is some notoriety. Saul doesn't like him. He's running for his life because Saul wants to kill him. The king, the head king, and David's kind of the king to come. And so David's on the run. Well, he's on the run, and guess what? He gets hungry. So he goes into the temple, and at the time, Abiathar is the high priest at that time. That's his son. He was kind of like, I guess you say, the most popular priest at that time. But a guy named Ahimelech, you'll see it in 1 Samuel chapter 1, he's the high priest. David comes in and goes, I need food for me and my boys. And Ahimelech looks around, he actually says, we don't have any common food. The only thing we've got is the showbread, which was consecrated for God, and only after a week passed could you eat what was left. They put new bread out, and they could have the leftovers. He says, this stuff is God's bread. But I love what Ahimelech does. He's got some morality about him. He knows the spirit of the law. Well, should I keep this bread here? God's not going to eat it. It's just an offering to him. Or am I going to let David starve and his friends starve? So guess what Ahimelech does? He takes it upon his own authority. He goes and gets them the showbread and says, here, take it and give it back to your brothers, your guys that are with you. So Jesus is using this as an illustration. He's sitting there saying, he says, now if the high priest would do this for David, why are you griping about my boys here just plucking a little bit of grain every now and then? And see, their priorities were totally out of whack, and I'll show you that here in a moment. So let's keep on going. It says, verse 20, now Jesus is going to teach him something. 27, he's going to teach him something. He gave him an illustration. Now here's the principle. He said to them, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Just basically this. If you want to put it in Josh's Living Translation, the Sabbath was meant to be a blessing, not a burden. Now, can I go ahead and tell you this? We as Christians look at these kinds of things. I want to tell you, theologically, our Sabbath is not on Sunday. The Sabbath is this. It's in Jesus Christ. Where do we find our rest, refreshment, and rejuvenation and spiritual energy? In Jesus. When do you have access to him? All the time. Okay? We call this the Lord's Day to commemorate who? Jesus. All right? Now, here's what I want you to understand. This is what people, so why do we have this? All right? I want you to get this. What's church for? Church is not meant to be a burden to you. If church is a burden, if you think the church, we need you here to fill the seats so we can have church, you missed it. You missed it. Okay? I hope you jump out of bed Sunday morning ready to come here to be with the saints and worship God and use the church as a tool for excitement, refreshment, and just spiritual rejuvenation. Let me tell you this. You're missing what the Lord of the Sabbath would say to you. If you're coming here to check it off the list, you don't understand it. But if you're coming here because you're desperate for teaching and encouragement and for healing, you're in the right place with the right attitude and the right heart. But I love this next statement. Get this. Ooh, y'all, this is heavy. And man, I've already got 10 minutes left. All right, we got to roll. See, this is what happens when I talk slow, but then I get in trouble for talking fast. Verse 28, therefore, the Son of Man is also the Lord of the Sabbath. Jesus is so cool here, because you probably don't catch this, but this is awesome. Jesus is mostly speaking Aramaic. The Bible was wrote in Greek, okay? The New Testament was wrote in Greek, but the vernacular that Jesus would have used was this Aramaic. And in the Old Testament, what was most of the Old Testament written in? Hebrew. But guess what? There happens to be 4 chapters in Daniel, the book of Daniel, that's wrote in Aramaic. And in Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 through 14, you may have heard this. It's a very popular prophecy from Daniel where it says, there is one like the Son of Man who comes up to the Ancient of Days. That's a terminology for Yahweh. And he receives a kingdom, and all peoples and all languages worship him. Okay, so here's what you need to understand. In that regular day, when someone said the Son of Man, it was kind of like an idiom for mankind. So probably the way this fell on the ears of the Pharisees would have been something like this. Therefore, mankind is also Lord of the Sabbath. It kind of follows logically. Well, if the Sabbath was created for man, then guess who gets to dictate what happens on the Sabbath? Humanity. That's not what Jesus was saying. Because if they called it, they'd have jumped all over him. You know what? His favorite self-designation, his favorite title wasn't Son of God. The movie's got it wrong. It's not any of those things. His favorite thing to call himself is, I'm the Son of Man. Why? I'm talking about Daniel chapter 7. He was saying this, I'm the one who went to Yahweh and received all authority. What I say happens on the Sabbath, happens on the Sabbath. That's what he was saying. So here's the point. If you need these reasons here for these values, not only are they biblical reasons, listen to this, they're Jesus reasons. All right? Now, some of you are going, why are we going through all of this law? What's this have to do with life? Because here is where push comes to shove, is when we jump into chapter 3. Okay, now we're going to move fast. Let's look at this. It says, and he entered the synagogue again. Jesus is going to push him. He's going to show him that he really does have authority here. And a man was there who had a withered hand. That's a terrible translation. Okay? It's not that he had a withered hand. It says in the Greek, it's whose hand was withered. Now you say, what's the difference? Is this. This kind of gives you the idea that maybe he had a withered hand from birth. The testament, more than likely, is this, is that he had a withered hand like due to an accident or a disease. Does that make sense? It's something that happened later in life. This man didn't always have a withered hand. Now that will become important in just a little bit. Luke even tells us that it was his right hand. It was his dominant hand. It was the administrative hand that was withered. Now it goes on, he says this, verse 2, so they watched him closely whether he would heal him on the Sabbath so that they might accuse him. Now the point earlier was this, when they were plucking out of the grain fields, the Pharisees had the audacity to say that was harvesting, which was work. That were just plucking people, like chill. Now here's what they're looking for today. If you weren't in a matter of life or death, your trip to the physician could wait to the next day. Does that make sense? If you weren't about to die, you just waited. Now, here's what you got to understand. Is a withered hand, moments away from death? Come on. No. Okay? Could his healing could have waited? Yeah. You didn't have to work as a physician on the Sabbath. All right? But notice, here's what I want you to notice here in chapter 2. So that they might accuse him. I think Chris will appreciate this for just a second. That word so that in the Greek is hina. They had determined to come to the synagogue to find something wrong with Jesus. This happens today all the time. Let me ask you, why do you come to church? Do you come for healing or do you come to find something wrong? You come to find something wrong, let me tell you what party you belong with? The Pharisees. Have you ever realized it may have something so much more to do with just your preferences and what you like? And that's what the Pharisees, they better do it our way or he gets the highway. And what? You've totally missed Jesus. Listen to that. Now let's move on a little bit more. It says in verse 3, and he said to the man who had the withered hand, step forward. Now, this is awesome. This is what I love about the antithesis of Jesus. All these guys were spying in the background. Get what I'm saying? They had murderous designs in their heart. They saw this man simply as a tool, not to help, There was never a thing across their mind that they were going to give this man help. They wanted to use him to capture Jesus. And I love what Jesus says. Jesus is not afraid here. What to do? Hey, come on up. Come on out in the open. Don't hide from them. Don't be afraid of them. Who cares what they say? And can I tell you this, guys? We get this a lot at Beaver Dam. And I'm just going ahead and address it. Guess what? The church is for people who are hurting and need healing. Don't ever be ashamed that you need to come down to the altar or you need to talk and confess and get counseling. You need to cry. Do you get that? Listen, if you have it together, don't come here. You're wasting a good Saturday or Sunday. You can be watching the pregame, okay? But if you're messed up like I am, this is a great place to be. This is for you. You're not for it. Does that make sense? You got to catch that. Now it goes on. He says this, verse 4. Then he said to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? Jesus makes just a heck of a question here. He's going to move it from a legal issue to a moral issue. Now, before I give you the point, I'm going to give you these points really quick because the last few is just bam, 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 bam. I want to show you real quick this verse from Matthew. Go ahead and click this, all right, on the board. Matthew, in the harmony of the Gospels, Jesus adds this section here. It says this, he said to them, which one of you has a sheep? If it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will he not take hold of it and lift it out? Excuse me. Oh, how much more value is a man than a sheep? So is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath? Notice this next verse from Proverbs. I want you to catch this. Click it one more time. Proverbs 12:10. Whoever is righteous has regard for the life of the beast. All right? But the mercy of the wicked is cruel. Here's the whole point, Christians. You need to understand this. We don't have to devalue animal life in order to value human life. Here's the point, though. There is a priority. There's something wrong with America when we'll take care more for animals and plants than we will for human life. So here's my first point. Go ahead and get this. Prioritize human life. If you want to be a part of a minister of life, that better be your number one priority. Can I go ahead and just get political with you? And I usually avoid this like a bullet. So this should tell you how I've just come convinced of this. Josh Taylor will never give his vote to somebody that's pro-choice. That's a legal issue. I have a moral issue. I will not murder babies. Sorry. And let me tell you, if I had two candidates and they're both pro-choice, my conscience says abstain. I'm not going to be responsible for that. That's one of my things. Usually, you tell Chris, he'll know. I don't ever talk like this. That's how big of an issue I think it is. It is. We prioritize life. Now, I'm going to let you tell you, there's much more practical things for us to do. And I'm going to share those things with you by the end of the sermon. But let me tell you, and prioritize it in your life. Let me tell you this. I don't know what you're going through, whether you got friends or families that struggle with decisions right now. Morally right here, you're going to see Jesus take a stand. Forget legality. Forget it. I don't care what you think. This is a moral issue. And let me say this. I'll go ahead and make this confession clear. Even if we overturn Roe versus Wade, will abortion still happen in America? Absolutely. So what is it really? It's still a moral issue. People still need to see Jesus in order to see the sanctity of life. Does that make sense? Let me tell you, we can't argue for the sacredness of life. Only God, I think, can give that to people. Does that make sense? The reason it's a moral issue for me is why? Because Jesus said it is. You know? So I want you to prioritize human life. But notice what they said. Notice what happens in verse 4. It says, but they kept silent. Now that's interesting. Was the man endangered for his life? The withered man? No. Here's what you got to understand. You may want to write this down. In Exodus chapter 3, I cannot read my writing. 32:14 and 35:2. I think that's right. Guess what was the punishment for not keeping the Sabbath? Say it, Wayne. You got it. Death. Now, I want you to think about this. Jesus was willing to heal this man at the expense of what? His own life. That's powerful. See, Jesus wasn't saying, hey, is it good or evil to do good to this man? Or he knew what was in their hearts. You'll run out today and stone me today on the Sabbath, but you won't let me heal him. Something's messed up. Can I say that? That's kind of the way things are culturally. You know what I'm saying? Yo, we'll run you out, make you look like idiots and morons, you get what I'm saying, before we ever give in to the moral issue. But let me tell you, I love Jesus' determination. I'm telling you right now, Jesus, now, I think everybody understands the grand design here, but the fact of his willingness to know what was on the line when he called this man up to the plate. You're willing to kill me today because I'm willing to heal this man today. Did that stop Jesus? Nope. Now, verse 5, and then I'll give you my second point. It says, and when he had looked around, that word, the around word, is just pretty cool. The prefix to it is peri or perimeter. So he literally looks around the entire synagogue, spotting these Pharisees out. He looks from eye to eye, and notice his reaction to this whole issue. He says he looked at them with anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts. There's three words that's really interesting. Anger here is in the aorist tense. It's once and done. The grieved is in a present tense, being angered, being grieved. He continued to be grieved. So here's the whole point. What's the appropriate response to this? First of all, y'all, if you're not angry about this whole abortion issue, something is wrong with your moral health. If you think it's, no big deal. Whoo, there's a problem. You need to be angry by it. The issue is this, though, and this is what Christians don't understand. Is anger the long-term response to this issue? No, it was one and done. What was the continued response? Grieved spirits. Here's the sad part. We got people who will publicly challenge these issues, but where are the people who just simply lament them? Where are our prayers where are altars full of people who are on their knees just crying over the issue? You don't see that? Hey, we'll call a protest before we'll call a prayer meeting. Something's jacked up. What's going to change the hearts of people? God, not legislation. So here's my second point. Put this up on the board for me. Hey, it's okay to publicly challenge. We've got to be defenders of the truth. All right? There's nothing wrong with that. But let me tell you this. It does no good if you don't demonstrate compassion. What if Jesus had rolled up in there and goes, you guys don't know what you're talking about. And with her hand, man, I got to roll. With her hand, guy's like, what? You see what I'm saying? And here's the sad part, guys. And our generation gets it all the time. I'm preaching, forget the time. If you need to walk out, walk out. Here's what I want you to understand. This is what's sad. More people know what we're against than what we're for. And let me tell you, we may have done a good job articulating this is wrong. But let me tell you guys, if we think it's wrong, we better be offering solutions as to how we make it right. I'm going to give you a couple things. I don't know it all, but I'll give you a couple things. Now, my wife thinks I know it all, but, I'm just saying. Somebody's laughing too much. All right. Last thing here, and I'll be quiet. You can go home. Verse 5. When he looked around at them in anger, being grieved by the hardness of their heart. Wow, and that word hardness, I got to tell this to you. I'm a nerd. I love this word. It's porosis. Anybody have osteoporosis? What is it? You know what I'm talking about? Hardening. It's hard to move. He's saying this. They become morally immobile. Jesus was grieved that these people couldn't. Do you not see this? And they're just like, no, this is legality. This is not a moral issue. And Jesus was grieved by it. But it goes on to say this. He says this. He said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. Wow. Then verse 6, and the Pharisees went out immediately, plotted with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy them. A couple things real quick, and I'll keep quiet and be done. Number one, this is the first mention in all of Mark where the Pharisees had set their eyes to kill Jesus. man, that's what I'm trying to say. I want you to get what was at stake. So far, they've been like, okay, we don't like this guy. After this incident, what do? We're going to kill him. And notice who they made bedfellows there. The Herodians. These are like half Jews, half Romans. The Pharisees, who were thoroughbreds, would have never messed with them. But what? They were going to need spiritual and political action to take down Jesus. You need to understand how revolutionary Jesus was to this whole crew. But the part that I want to stay on is the man. I like to try to, when I'm doing a sermon, I like to try to put myself in each person's shoes as best as I can. And I went through the whole sermon, and I forgot to put my head on, what about the withered man? What was this guy thinking the entire time? Could you imagine you show up to synagogue, just going to be a regular synagogue day, going to synagogue, all of a sudden Jesus shows up. Oh, awesome, we're going to get to hear from Jesus. Next thing you know, you're his sermon illustration. Like, hey, you got a withered hand? You know what I'm saying? He steps on up. Pharisees are out there. He probably gets it like, this isn't good. We're going to die. You're going to help this guy out to make a point. He could kill me too. And here's where I think I want you to understand the faith of this withered man. Is notice this, Jesus didn't go like, okay, just put your hands in your pocket. When you get home, check it out. Does that make sense? He didn't do that. What did he say? Stretch it out. Put it on out here for everybody to see. That's one of those ones where you just wouldn't be caught in this dilemma. Like, all right. And as he's stretching it out, man, it's becoming mobile and strong again. Now, here's what I want you to know. You can put this on the last one on. You got to receive and share the healing of the dying Savior. And its simply point is this, y'all. Hey, the healing that comes from Jesus cannot be hidden. Can't be. You can't sit there on your pew and, yes, Jesus saved me, and then you go home and don't tell anybody about it. That's not the way Jesus works. Faith becomes a very public thing. Does that make sense? All right, you want to be healed on the inside, then confess it on the outside. And I think this man stretching out of his hand was his confession. Yeah, Jesus, I trust you. You're the right one here. You're the Savior. I'll take what you got. And here's what I want to encourage you to with today. I don't know who you are, where you've come from. Yeah, it's going to cost you something. Yeah, you're going to have to stand up and stretch out to reach for Jesus. But isn't it worth it? That's the question you got to say. You sitting in your silence, being like the Pharisees kind of spying Jesus out, that's not where real life and healing happen. Hey, where healing happens is where Jesus is. Let me tell you, where Jesus is, he'll take you to places you never wanted to go. But that's what it means to follow him. I want to leave you with some very practical things about what we can do for sanctity of life. Some practical things, not just some political things, and then I'll be done. As man, I'm starting to see my sign outside of the glare. You know that's bad. Here's the first thing. I want to go ahead and give you just a number that you can call. If you know of anybody or can help anybody with issues of a crisis pregnancy or they're recovering from one, go ahead and put this on the slide. This is just the one I could find. It's Anderson Crisis Pregnancy Center. It's in downtown Anderson. I'm sure, let me tell you all, you can Google it. There's a lot of good places out there that you can go that are Christian-based, that are going to still provide great care for women, for the whole family. But I would encourage you, I'm about to give you some steps. Regardless, would you do me the favor, especially leaders, teachers, all this, write down that phone number, 864-231-0077. It's their hotline, but they also will pick up about anything, all right? But it's open 24/7. So if you know somebody that's going through something, this is a great resource. Let's team up with groups that are already doing things. Here's a few things that I want to challenge you with, okay? No, not everybody's going to take up the call. But I may say something this morning that may hit you, that you go, man, I'm passionate about that. Number one, welcome women and families who are in a crisis pregnancy or recovering from an abortion. Here's the point. The church has a stigma for a long time for putting a scarlet letter on these types. Let me tell you, when they come through our door, we should lavish them with love. You hear me? No more, look what they did. Hey, what's past is past. Here's my whole point is this. Jesus could have sat there and ridiculed the guy. Well, dummy, why did you let that rock fall in your hand? Why did you not go to the doctor and take care of this infection before your hand withered? Did you hear him say any of that? No. What's past is past. All right? Number 2, host a baby shower for a crisis pregnancy center. Maybe y'all as a group, I don't know, WMU, Brotherhood, you can too. I don't know, it kind of may be creepy, but whatever I'm going to say is this. Put enough money in Bat Pig, maybe we'll send it over there. What I was going to say is this, is call them up, say, what things do you need? They give like diapers. I don't know how you take care of a baby, but they do. Call them, and they'll tell you, this is how you can help us out. All right. Number 3, a Sunday school class might want to adopt a woman in crisis pregnancy. Now, this is a little bit more sensitive. I'm going to get a little more difficult. Maybe you know somebody. Maybe you want to call that crisis pregnancy center and say, look, is there somebody who would be willing to interact with our class, and throughout her pregnancy, we take care of her? I'm not saying you pay every bill or anything like that, but yeah, we'll throw her a shower. We'll make sure she has the stuff she needs. Because let me tell you, there's a lot of this. A lot of the logic is this: I don't have the resources to take care of the baby. And when a church would surround them and go, but we will help you. You see what I'm trying to say? That may change things for them. Number 3, and for those who are involved in our local school systems, ask for suggestions on what our church could do for our local middle and high school students. Hey, people, wake up. I've been in student ministry long enough. This is happening really young. Middle school, high school. Go to your counselors. If it's not a problem at that school, great. If it's becoming a problem, say, what can we do as a church? Because sometimes it's kind of, it's touchy-feely kind of thing. I don't know what we ought to do. Just ask, what can we do? And you'd be surprised. Last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and challenge this issue, explore the benefits of adoption. You may be in a position financially and have the time where, let me tell you, if we're going to be, this is what I think the answer is, if we're going to be anti-abortion, we have to be pro-adoption. Okay? And let me tell you this, as adopted spiritually people, we ought to be the most adopting type people in the world. We were far from God, and He brought us into His family. We can definitely do it physically. I want you to think about that. I want every head bowed and every eye closed.